at is my attempt at deepening my own friendships while modeling friendships with adults, to try and form caring, authentic, and revolutionary relationships after trauma and PTSD. A lot of times, people that experience PTSD or like trauma in their life kind of getting stuck in like stories of, oh, this is how friendships always gonna look, or this is how I'm always gonna look. So it's more of me going through the process of like learning different ways to be friends with people. So this is my name is Fatima, but of course you know that you've been listening for a minute. I use she, her, hers. I'm a Black African American that connects to spirituality through Southern and Indigenous spirituality practices, predominantly like Hindu, Islam, Sufism, stuff like that. I'm also a Black lesbian, so a lot of my politics looks like that. I'm not the biggest yapper, so I'm not a big talker. I like talking about love and I like talking about change. So that's kind of where this going. Today, I'm here with Sierra, which is a friend of mine, that I've met here in Gallup about a year? I don't know, a year and a half? Yeah, almost 2 years ago at this point. And I'll let you give a little introduction for yourself. So like your pronouns, family background, like how you connect to spirituality, anything else you want us to talk about or want us to know.
Okay. Yeah. I'm Sierra, and I grew up as Punk. That was my nickname. And I grew up in this area around Gallup, outskirts of Gallup, as part of a Christian mission community called Rehoboth. And I identify as both Dene and Dutch through my ancestry. And so I really grew up definitely bridging two worlds, and it's very much a part of who I am. What makes me who I am and how I walk through the world is always in those kind of borderland spaces, you know, always kind of neither nor both and. And I'm a mother of 3 now, which also deeply informs how I relate to people. Because I think my children, I should say, are of 4 distinct ancestries. 2 from me, 2 from my partner, who is from the West African country of Ghana, so 2 different tribes from West Africa. And raising children to be really global citizens, to be deep thinkers, to be loving human beings, kind human beings, you know, to know who they are and to accept other people for who they are. That is a task. It is something that shows up in my day-to-day life, you know, and kind of affects the way that I look at the world, because I'm thinking, what do I want my children to see? What do I want them to know? And just kind of recently, like this year, my son started kindergarten. He was having a little bit of trouble in the beginning with like being kind at school. And I think because at home we kind of allow the siblings to tussle, to like argue a little bit, work things out, like it's a part of their life.
Right.
Hopefully it's positive conflict resolution, but it's hard to teach a kindergartner that. And yet, right, I also was deeply aware that he's Black male growing up in America. You know, there's that part of his experience that it is a big factor in his life story, and that I don't understand myself personally, what that's like, and how that'll be for him. But that I realized the most important thing, if I could boil it down, is I want him to be kind. And so I started, sorry, this was like, I'm like way going off my introduction here.
All of this
circle
is
back around.
adding to your story.
I started just, when he gets out of the car in the morning to go to school, I say, be kind. And like that's sort of the mantra right now, is let's just be kind. And that it's simple and not always obvious, right? It's not always easy. And so, yeah, I moved back to this area 4 years ago with my family, and that changed my life story pretty significantly because I've lived other places, and I do consider myself kind of an in-between person, right? Like I move between and among people, but I'm not kind of fixed in where I belong and even the geography of where's home. But I am happy to be back on this land, and I do have a deep appreciation for the Southwest, and it's been good to move myself back here. I think about the world differently than I did as a child, and so coming back here now as an adult and as a clinical social worker is just a different lens. I'm living here.
That kind of perfectly moves me to what the next part was, because you answered about generation already by talking about like your kids. Because that's what I was going to ask you about. Like, what do you think is different about making friends in this generation versus the generation that your kids have grown up in, or the good generation your parents have grown up in? And I don't know. I don't feel like I need to ask that now, because you've kind of given me a background already. But I'm going to move to the next question, which is, do you have friends and do you have enemies?
If I have enemies, I don't know who they are. They haven't made themselves very known. I'm pretty conflict avoidant myself anyway, so I kind of try not to have enemies. I don't like having enemies. I do have a lot of friends, and I think I'm quickly trusting of people. I'm a very open person. Let's say I haven't really been brokenhearted much in my life, and I recognize that almost as a privilege, right? Like that I haven't had my heart broken a whole lot. It has been for sure, but I see myself as like fairly free from relationship trauma. And that is apparent to me in the way that I feel safe around a lot of people, how I open myself up very early in getting to know somebody. And I'm fairly open about my emotions. I think sometimes if I'm not being honest, I'm kind of fooling myself at the same time. I'm not really intentionally hiding something, but I'm kind of maybe faking it for my own sake, and then I realize later that I wasn't being authentic. But yeah, I'm a fairly open person, and so I make friends easily and quickly, and I like that about my life. I really do like that about who I am, and I notice it because it's in contrast to my partner. He doesn't open up, doesn't trust people as easily. And it kind of comes from more of that side of like, prove yourself to earn my trust. And I'm like, oh, you have my trust until you break it. So we just approach people very differently in general. And I notice that I'm just more of an open book. And
I wonder if that relates to like the self-trust the trust you have in yourself though. Because thinking about that, and like I kind of do identify a little bit with like your partner's, like I'm getting out of that, moving from a different place. So how you have my trust until you break it, instead of you need to earn my trust, because I've realized that perspective has been very like pushing away of others. instead of it being what I wanted it to be, of like, I'm gonna be who I am, so show me who you are.
Yeah.
But when you have to prove yourself to somebody, you don't really feel like it. You don't feel like, you feel like, oh, you can do something wrong and it can just go away, instead of it just being, oh, you have my trust, until you break it. It's just my boundary, and it's not you or who you are having to prove. And it's also interesting when you bring up heartbreak, because you would think that heartbreak would teach you that, or has taught me, or would teach me, that I should trust myself more because I survived the heartbreak and try again after. But instead it's that feeling of, that's pain, I don't want to see that again, I don't want to feel that again. Which is natural, which is normal. Like nobody wants to put their hand on a hot stove. Right. But that's a different perspective, because I always wonder about, not always, but I did wonder that about you and our friendship, because like you're very honest and truthful and like how you present yourself. If you're not having a good day, you're like, I'm not having a great day. You're not gonna like pour out all of it, but you're not gonna be dishonest about what you're feeling.
Yeah, when people ask me how I'm doing, I try to actually express it.
Right.
This is really how I'm doing. What about you? And yeah, depending on context. I mean, in passing in the grocery store, I might just say, I'm good, you. Yeah. Right? Even if I'm not. But it's interesting how the nervous system comes into play and all this, the self-protective instinct of our bodies, and how we try to sometimes intentionally counter that, like practice vulnerability, and try to learn a healthier pattern maybe. But other times, it's so helpful to protect us, or to, like save us from ourselves too sometimes.
But there are times when you get stuck in like this looks like something I experienced before, or this person is acting like somebody else that did something to me before. And instead of it just being that person's life is different than any other person that you've encountered, it's easier to just say, well, now I'm going to run away. Now I'm not going to be around that, because it looked kind of like this. Meanwhile, it really wasn't that. It's just you looking at it that made it become that. Yeah. But yeah, I really appreciate your honesty, because it makes it easier for me to be honest. It makes it easier for everybody else to feel like, okay, well, she's showing her true self, so I'm my true self. With that, when's the last time you made a friend? And you can tell me about them. Tell me as much detail as you want, or as little detail as you want. You can give me names or not names.
Okay. Yeah, it's great, because I did make a new friend fairly recently, and it's a very different kind of friendship than I've had before. It's actually somebody who my partner met first, and wanted to kind of develop a friendship with, and also thought she and I would get along really well. And so we kind of jumped off the deep end in terms of like, I've never met this person. The first time we met, we went to stay at her house overnight in Albuquerque, because she lives in Albuquerque. So we often are in Albuquerque, and it's nice to stay the night if you can, right? Not go out and back in the same day. But it's a bit of a task with the 3 kids, and it's also an expense these days, for a hotel room or something. So we stayed at her house, and we just had hours to visit then, right? Yeah. And we ended up staying in to cook dinner and eat. And then the next morning, before we packed up and left, we were visiting again and talking more. So it was like this intensive, right, meet and greet. And by the time we left her house the next day, it felt like family almost. It felt like, we are so glad to have found each other. Right. You really fit, and she is a biracial woman, older than us, in a different phase of life, but identified immediately with our daughter. You know, it like saw our daughter who's 11 now and said like, that was me, right? She looks just like I did at that age, right? And oh, our hair, like we have the same hair. And there was kind of this immediate little affinity between them. And it was sweet, right? Because our children don't have a lot of people in their life that look like them. Certainly not close relatives, right? Like all their cousins look very different than they do. And so it's really great when we can talk about those things, talk about racial identity, talk about experience based on how the world sees you in the world, you know, as a mixed race person. I have some of that. Even my partner has some of that as an immigrant. Like, I'm not Black American, you know, that's not my story, but people might assume it is. Our children to kind of be Black presenting, but to be multicultural, multiracial, and so we made really fast friends with this new person who even my partner had never really had much in-depth conversation with. It was like they had met in context and said, "Ooh, you know, let's be in touch." And then it was, "Let's meet my family," and then it was like, "Here we all are, and this just feels great." So now we've gone again and stayed overnight with her a second time. And in the meantime, we've started having little phone calls, sharing things here and there. And we even had, this is kind of the rare part, is, you know, we had like a relationship conversation. Almost like the kind of cliche, like when you start dating somebody and you want to define the relationship and you're like, so what is this?
So are we friends or not?
So I was like, I'm sorry if this comes across weird. But I feel comfortable and safe to talk about it. Like, it was because she had offered us to stay at her house even if she wasn't there. And I was like, that's a lot, right? Like, you really trust us. So I asked her kind of like, where does that come from? Like, you exhibited a high level of trust to me very early in this friendship. What is that about? And so we talked about it. And we talked a little bit about how on an energetic level it feels to be connected. Because she did say, no, I'm not like that with everybody. I said, maybe you're just somebody that, you know, is
like everybody
extreme hospitality kind of person, and they exist, right? So it was cool to have an open conversation and to feel like we were bearing our souls a little bit of like, we both feel like this is a really good connection. And we both feel very safe in it. And I feel like you can be around my children and they can be around you, which isn't always the case. You know, sometimes kids are apprehensive of grown-ups, new grown-ups. And I noticed how, for example, I handed my baby, or one of us handed her the baby, and the baby was just like, okay, you know, which is not like, sometimes you hand the baby to a new adult and they're like, nope, mom, I want mom back. And that didn't happen. And I noticed it. I just observed, okay, like it already feels like coming here is coming to see family. Or like an old friend, or someone I must have known a lot longer than we have actually known each other. So it was just a really beautiful story of friendship, I think, that I got to experience in the past month.
I think that was also like really creative. So all of you involved, because Fidel too, like because especially when you have kids and you're established, it's not usually the time where you meet new people, especially new people that you travel with and spend the night with. It feels often like, oh, well, no, we're not going to do that. Or, like you said, it feels strange. to even have the ability to stay at this person's house without them being there, like the fact that they trusted you to do that, it could feel strange. I think that's lovely. Like, we always hear about being brave when it comes to partners, but we don't hear about being brave when it comes to friends. So I feel like that's such a lovely story, and that person sounds very, very lovely. Thinking about that, and the fact that this friendship just is literally a month old, what or why do you want to form friendships? Like, what is the intention behind that? What do you think has, like, what is the call? What are you looking for?
Connection. I think it's a very human thing to desire connection and to be known. And we can't be known if we don't show ourselves, right? If we don't share ourselves,
right?
We can't be known. And I think we all want to be known and seen and held, like in a moment of fear and any emotional state that's even, grief, anxiety, anger. Connection, human connection is medicine in those moments. It's the thing that we innately, as social mammals, even seek out, right? That, of course, gets distorted by trauma and PTSD and, when things are kind of shaken up and off. I want to be careful not to say, like, we're supposed to, or, you should feel that, but it's that attachment, healthy attachment, and it's how we're wired, what our nervous systems respond to it. And we experience safety in connection. It's very different to self-soothe or to try and create safety for yourself if you're alone, isolated, when you're not feeling well. It's a different thing. It's not impossible. I mean, we do that as well, self-regulation, self-soothing. But our bodies respond so much quicker to another person, to co-regulation. Our bodies respond much more effectively, when a group comes around us and says, we got you, you're going to be okay, you did great, any of those things that we need. And unfortunately, a lot of families aren't great at providing that. Hopefully we do have friends within our own families, but I know a lot of people who don't. So, I think friendship is, it's always been important, but it's almost even more important as we move. A lot of us live away from family. A lot of us don't experience that clan or village type of connection anymore. The village is now kind of this like self-created social network. And we need that. We need the mutual aid when hard times hit. And so that's sort of my intention always, is somebody who I can give and receive that with.
I like that answer. I think for a long time I was a very much like, if I can handle it, then I don't need another person type of person. Like very much, I don't need anything. I don't need anything. Meanwhile, like I had a broken leg or something. Excuse me. Yeah. And I would often feel like a failure for not being able to handle things on my own without realizing that's not how you're supposed to be, like, not supposed to, but you're a social being.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a natural response to have to do all this on your own.
Right.
So I've had to figure out different things about being friends and what friendship is, and like, okay, what feels safe, what doesn't feel safe. Starting from I have a weird relationship with anger because the family I grew up in, there's a lot of anger, and like a lot of the anger was violent. So anger and violence are the same thing to me a lot of times. But realizing that I can be angry at a friend was a lot more healing, I guess you can say, than always realizing that I have to be happy with them and content in everything that happens. Like, I can be angry, we can talk about it and move forward, and it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was more healing to me than having this friendship for 5, 7, 8, 10 years where we never fought.
Mm-hmm.
Realizing, oh, I'm okay both ways. It's fine. Like, that level of acceptance. I want to go back to the top a little bit, though. So I didn't ask you in the beginning, but actually, you know what? I'll pause real quick. So, yes. So, I wanted to talk about my life updates because it's been a minute since I recorded. And then I want to share some of Sierra's as well. So what am I reading right now? It's called In the Cerulean Sea. It's by T.J. Klein, I believe. Let me make sure. The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune, sorry. It's a children's book. It's magical based. I'm kind of just trying to be frivolous and silly, so I really wanted to read that. And then what I'm listening to right now, of course, is Megan. She came out with Act 2. You guys heard about how much I enjoyed the first one, and now I'm really, really enjoying the second part. And how's the weather out there? So today it's pretty windy, a little dusty outside, but it's sunny. It's cold. I think it's going to be in the teens tonight. I don't know. And my weather inside, I feel like it's the same as probably most people that are hearing this. Just a little stormy, a little itchy, I guess. I feel like there's something I should be doing, but don't know what it is. I feel like there's somewhere I need to be, but I don't know where it is. I feel like there's people I need to be talking to, but I don't know who any of them are. What about you, Sierra? What are you reading right now? Or are you reading something right now?
I would like to be reading more. Unfortunately, I usually end up on Netflix instead of with my book when I get those rare moments to just decompress.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's less mental work.
Right. What are you watching on Netflix?
I'm watching The Law According to Lydia Poet. It's Italian.
Mm-hmm.
About the first female lawyer in Italy.
Okay.
It's kind of a drama series about based on her story, but I realized that if I don't like the characters, the lead characters, it's hard for me to get into a show. So I found that I did like Lydia, so I'm in that right now. The stack of books on my nightstand that I have started all of them, but it's like, which one am I going to pick up if I decide to read? Are Brown Girl Dreaming by Jacqueline Woodson, Ancestral Medicine by Daniel Floor, and a Thich Nhat Hanh book about the basic, like, kind of a summary of the Buddha's teachings. So I kind of tend to do like spiritual reading. The Jacqueline Woodson book is written in kind of a poetry collection about her biography, so her story coming up, and so it's interesting. I'm reading it because my daughter we got it from my daughter when she was 10. She read it, and then she was like, "Mom, you have to read this." So I am, and it's wonderful. But I just don't. It is good for little snippets. If you have 5 minutes, you can read a few little pages at a time.
That's so interesting. So, an aside, I really like Brown Girl Dreaming. I have a bookmark of one of the poems on literally on my altar in the mirror.
Oh my
on
gosh.
my altar. So that's,
I love that.
I love that too. That makes me happy. I love hearing little pieces of like each other and each other. And are you listening to any specific singers, artists right now?
I'm actually not a big music person. My partner is the one who always has music on and is always finding new music and putting it on, you know.
Yeah.
And so I kind of defer. However, one person who I discovered that I really liked, aside from my partner, is John Batiste. And not the newest album, I think it's like the second last album, World Music Radio. That is one I'll put on when I'm driving around town. It's just a feel good album, and my kids kind of like it, and it's just a variety of sounds. So
do you like? I don't know a lot of people that don't seek out music. So what do you like to listen to, or do you like to be like quiet?
I just kind of a default, like in the morning I'll put on NPR. So I like to get my news, you know, updates. Often that might be if I'm in the car. So I'll have the radio on if I'm in the car. We do subscribe to XM radio, so my stations that I go to are like the Coffee House, 90s on 9, and Bob Marley, Tough Gong Radio. So kind of flip between the stations and see what, what is playing something good. This the 90s pop music, top hits of the 90s, like it's just nostalgic.
Yeah.
It's already 30 years ago, you know.
Gosh, yeah.
I can enjoy that, but I like the Coffee House, acoustic, kind of like easier listening stuff. And but my partner's really into reggae, and that's often what we have on at home. I am not the one who puts music on at home. He puts it on. So,
but you prefer something that's more like easy listening, soft, soothing, or like nostalgic.
Okay. Or kind of happy music.
Happy music. Okay.
Yeah.
So music is something more like mood.
It's definitely if I'm in the mood for something. Yeah. I have like something that might surprise people is I have a hymns playlist in my Spotify, and I have a country playlist in my Spotify, and those are purely nostalgic for certain moods. Right? That's what I go to. Only at specific times. Like I don't, in general, want hymns on.
Right.
But there is a time and place.
You're not like in the shower with the
right.
sing along. But that's interesting. That's very different way than I listen. I feel like I put music when I need to wake up. When I want to feel different. So if I'm sad, I'll put music that's more lively. If I'm angry, I'll put angry music so I can get anger out. Like it's more like I just use music all the time. But I do like podcasts and audiobooks more than music, especially if like a long drive or something. I get tired of just hearing music, but I want to hear a story or somebody talking. I'll listen to that. Yeah. And I wonder why that is about myself. So, how's the weather out there for you?
It's a little melancholy. A little bit of an emotional dry spell, you might say. And I'm also recently transitioned to be a stay-at-home mom. So that's a big part of my mood these days. You know, it's like, okay, nothing urgent, one day at a time. What are we doing today?
Yeah.
It's easy to get bored, you know, even with the baby, like, I'm hanging out with my baby and doing
Yeah.
it. She's not talking to me,
Yeah.
you know. I get hungry for company.
Yeah.
Get a little lonely and bored sometimes, and I think that's part of it. Is like I just miss the stimulation of my job, and especially as a therapist, counselor. Like I love interacting with people, just like this, like sitting down with somebody, expressing yourself, listening to them, sharing the experience, creating that space, and especially even like specifically being of support to somebody who has come for it.